The sun had just started to rise over the wide Wyoming plains. A thin layer of golden light spread across the ranch, touching the wooden fences, the quiet barns, and the distant hills that seemed to stretch forever. The cool air of early morning carried the fresh smell of dry grass and dust. The world looked calm, peaceful, and still. Tom Braddock stood on the porch of his old ranch house holding a steaming cup of black coffee in his hands. He was a tall man in his late 50s, with sun-kissed skin from years of working outdoors. His hat rested low on his brow, shading his eyes from the soft light. He had lived on this land since the day he was born. Every path, every fence post, and every tree was familiar to him. This land was not just his home. It was a part of him. His days were always the same. Before the sun rose too high, he would check the fences, look after the cattle, and make sure his horses were healthy and calm. Then he'd spend the day fixing small things, cleaning the barn, and doing whatever needed to be done to keep the ranch running smoothly. The work was hard, but Tom never complained. The ranch was his life. He took a slow sip of his coffee, listening to the morning sounds. A soft breeze moved through the tall grass. Birds were waking up and singing their first songs of the day. In the distance, the cows made low, gentle sounds. His favorite mare, Starling, was usually the first to greet him every morning. She was a strong, graceful horse with a golden-brown coat that shined like polished wood. Tom had raised her from the day she was born. She trusted him completely, and he loved her like family. As he finished his coffee, Tom stepped down from the porch and started walking toward the corral. His boots made a soft crunching sound on the dry earth. Everything looked as it always did. The fences were standing firm. The barn doors creaked lightly as the breeze passed through. It was just another ordinary morning, or so he thought. When he reached the fence, something unusual caught his attention. The air felt a little heavier, and the birds had gone silent. He stopped and listened carefully. At first, he heard nothing but the soft wind. Then a faint, strained sound reached his ears. It was coming from the direction of the creek, the small stream that ran behind the barn. Tom frowned. The sound wasn't like the usual noises he heard on the ranch. It wasn't the wind or a bird or even a distant cow. It sounded like a cry, a low, painful cry. He walked faster, his heart starting to beat a little quicker. As he approached the creek, the sound grew clearer. It was Starling. He could recognize her voice anywhere. But this wasn't her usual morning call. It was filled with fear. Tom broke into a jog. He passed the barn, rounded a corner, and saw the scene that made his chest tighten. Starling was standing near the edge of the creek, her golden-brown body trembling. Her front leg was caught in a twisted piece of old barbed wire that had been left there long ago, half buried under the grass. The more she tried to pull away, the more the wire tightened around her leg. She tossed her head and let out another desperate cry. Her breathing was fast and uneven, and her eyes were wide with fear. Tom stopped for just a moment, frozen in place. His mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. That barbed wire had been part of an old fence that should have been cleared years ago. Somehow, a piece of it had been left behind, hidden in the tall grass near the creek. And now Starling, his most trusted horse, was trapped in it. He took a careful step forward, trying not to startle her. "Easy, girl," he whispered, his voice low and gentle. "I'm here now. Don't worry." Starling shifted nervously, her leg pulling slightly against the wire. Tom winced. The wire was wrapped tightly. Any sudden movement could make things worse. He knew he had to be smart. He couldn't just rush in. Horses could panic easily, and Starling was already scared. He glanced around, taking in the scene with sharp, experienced eyes. The creek water glimmered softly in the morning light. The ground was uneven and damp, making it a tricky place to work. The wire was twisted in an awkward way, and the end of it was stuck deep in the ground. Tom's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't like fixing a loose fence or calming a restless horse. This was different. One wrong move and things could go from bad to worse. He slowly crouched down a few feet away from her, keeping his voice soft and calm. "It's all right, girl. I'm not going to hurt you. We'll get through this." Starling's ears flicked toward him. She recognized his voice, and even in her fear, there was trust in her eyes. But trust alone wouldn't free her. Tom needed to act carefully. For a moment, a cold wave of doubt passed through his mind. What if he couldn't free her? What if she moved too suddenly? What if the wire wouldn't come loose? But he quickly pushed those thoughts aside. Starling had been with him for years. She had carried him through storms, helped him move cattle across endless fields, and kept him company on lonely nights. She had never given up on him. and he wouldn't give up on her. Tom set his gloves on the ground beside him. He didn't want to scare her with sudden movements. He slowly reached out his hand, palm open, letting her see and smell him. She took a shaky breath but didn't back away. He moved closer inch by inch, whispering softly the whole way. The world around them seemed to disappear. There were no birds, no breeze, no sound except for Starling's quick breaths and the soft rustle of grass. When he finally got close enough to touch her neck, he placed his hand gently on her warm coat. "Good girl," he said softly. "You're doing so good." She shifted her weight slightly and Tom could feel how tense she was. He knew he had to act, but also that he couldn't rush. He carefully examined the wire. It was looped around her leg twice, with one end buried in the dirt. The barbs were sharp, but what mattered most now was keeping her calm. His first instinct was to grab the wire and pull it away quickly. But then a quiet voice in his mind stopped him. Don't pull it away." If he pulled too fast, it could tighten even more, making it worse. He exhaled slowly, trying to steady his shaking hands. This was the moment where everything depended on calm, careful choices. He had dealt with many problems on the ranch before, but nothing that made his heart race like this. The sun climbed higher, spilling warm light over the scene. A small breeze brushed against his face, carrying the smell of wet earth and hay. Time seemed to slow down. Tom knelt in the grass, his knees pressing against the damp soil. He slid his hand down gently toward her trapped leg, whispering the whole time to keep her steady. Starling's breath was still uneven, but she didn't fight him. She trusted him completely. He could feel the wire's cold metal under his fingers. It was rough, rusty, and wrapped tight. He studied every twist and turn of it, carefully planning his next move in his mind. He couldn't afford a single mistake. Tom thought about all the mornings like this one when Starling had carried him across the fields with ease. He remembered the day she was born, a small, fragile foal with bright, curious eyes. He remembered training her gently, earning her trust step by step. That bond was stronger than fear. It gave him courage now. He took another deep breath. His heartbeat slowed just enough to let him think clearly. This wasn't about speed. It was about trust, patience, and love. As the light flickered through the trees, Tom's shadow stretched long across the ground. He spoke softly again, almost like a prayer. "We're going to get you out of this, Starling. I promise. Just hold on, girl. Hold on." And in that quiet morning, surrounded by endless fields and golden light, a rancher knelt beside his frightened horse. Not as a man trying to control nature, but as a friend trying to save another. The story was only just beginning. Tom stayed on his knees, the damp ground pressing into his jeans, his hands just inches from the old wire. Starling shifted uneasily, her breathing fast and shallow. The early sunlight had grown brighter now, spreading across the fields like a warm blanket. But the air around Tom felt tight and heavy. He knew every second mattered. If he panicked, she would panic too. And if she panicked, everything would fall apart. He kept his hand on her neck, feeling the quick rhythm of her heartbeat. "It's all right, girl," he whispered softly. "We're in this together. You're not alone." Her ears flicked toward his voice, and her trembling slowed just a little. Tom felt a spark of hope. That small change meant she was listening to him, trusting him. That trust was the strongest thing they had at that moment. He studied the wire again. It was wrapped around her leg in 2 loops, and the end of it was stuck deep in the dirt. The more he looked, the clearer it became. This was not going to be easy. It would take time. It would take patience. Tom carefully removed his gloves and set them aside. He needed to feel the wire directly so he could understand how it was twisted. His fingers brushed against the cold metal. It felt rough and old, but he focused only on how it was wrapped, not what it might do. He slowly traced the wire with his fingertips, memorizing each turn. Starling shifted slightly and the wire tightened just a little. Tom froze. "Easy," he said in a calm, steady voice. "Don't move too much. I know it hurts, girl, but trust me." He took a deep breath and began working slowly. He loosened the grass around the wire first, pulling it away bit by bit. The ground was soft from the creek water, and his fingers were quickly covered in mud, but he didn't care. He wasn't thinking about anything else, not the ranch, not the chores, not the time. All that existed was Starling and the wire around her leg. Minutes passed, the air filled with the soft rustle of grass and Starling's uneven breaths. A hawk circled overhead, its shadow passing across the field. Somewhere far away, a cow mooed, but Tom didn't even hear it. His whole world had narrowed down to this one moment. Finally, the end of the wire shifted a little. Just a little. But enough to give him hope. He whispered softly, "That's it. That's it, girl." Starling responded with a small, shaky sound as if she could feel the pressure loosening slightly. Tom knew he couldn't rush. He had to work carefully. If he pulled too fast, everything would tighten again. So he kept moving slowly, talking to her the whole time. "Remember that storm last year?" he said quietly, almost as if telling a story to keep both of them calm. "You ran across that muddy field and we made it back to the barn together. You're strong, Starling. You've always been strong." His voice was steady, his movements sure. The bond between them had been built over years, and now it was guiding both of them through this test. The sun was fully up now. The golden light reflected off Starling's coat, making her look like she was glowing. Her breathing was still quick, but she no longer tried to pull away. She trusted him completely. Tom leaned closer, twisting the wire carefully with his bare hands. It wasn't easy. The wire was old and stubborn. It bit into the ground like roots that didn't want to let go. But Tom had the patience of a man who had spent his whole life working with the land. He didn't give up easily. After what felt like forever, one loop finally came loose. Starling let out a sound that was part sigh and part relief. Her leg still wasn't free, but Tom felt something inside him shift. That first loop was the hardest. Now he knew it was possible. "You're doing so good," he whispered. "We're almost there. Just a little more." He carefully adjusted his position, making sure his movements wouldn't scare her. She had to stay calm, or everything could go wrong again. He started working on the second loop, the one that was tighter and deeper in the mud. His hands ached. The rough wire had left thin marks on his skin, but he ignored it completely. What mattered was that Starling was still standing. She was scared, but she was trusting him with every breath. The second loop took longer. The wire didn't want to move. Tom could feel sweat forming on his forehead, mixing with the dirt on his skin. His heartbeat was steady but strong. He thought about his father, a rancher like him, who had taught him that animals weren't just animals. They were partners, family. His father's words echoed softly in his mind. "Never let fear decide for you. If they trust you, you have to be worthy of it." Tom felt a quiet strength fill his chest. He pressed his fingers deeper into the dirt, moving the wire a tiny bit at a time. Starling's eyes met his. It wasn't just a frightened animal looking at him. It was a friend. Then finally, with one slow and careful twist, the second loop loosened. Not completely, but enough to make a difference. Tom exhaled a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That's it, girl," he said softly, almost smiling. "We're getting you out of this." Starling shifted her weight, testing the leg carefully. Tom placed his hand gently on her shoulder to keep her still. "Not yet," he said calmly. "Wait for me." He reached down one more time, now working on the last piece, the end of the wire that was buried in the ground. He used a small stick nearby to pry it up bit by bit. The ground gave way slowly, like it didn't want to let go, but Tom didn't stop. He kept whispering softly, steady as a heartbeat, and then it happened. The last piece of wire came free. Tom gently unwound it from her leg, careful not to startle her. The moment the pressure was gone, Starling took a shaky step backward. Her leg was free. Tom leaned back on his heels, breathing hard. For a few seconds, the world was completely silent. Then Starling let out a long, soft breath, and like a sigh of relief, she didn't run away. She didn't panic. She simply lowered her head and stood beside him, her warm breath brushing against his shoulder. It was her way of saying thank you, even without words. Tom placed a hand gently on her neck. "You did it," he whispered. We both did. The golden morning sun bathed them both in light. The breeze carried the soft sound of the creek again. Birds began to sing like they had earlier, as if the world was returning to normal. Tom carefully checked her leg. It was tired and sore, but she was standing strong. She lifted it once, testing it gently, and then settled her weight again. She was going to be fine. He stood up slowly, stretching his tired back, and looked around at the quiet ranch. Everything was calm again, but Tom felt changed inside. This wasn't just another morning chore. This was a moment he would never forget. As he led Starling back toward the barn, the sound of their steps echoed softly on the ground. Tom walked slowly, letting her move at her own pace. He spoke to her quietly, telling her everything would be all right. She followed him without hesitation, her trust stronger than ever. When they reached the barn, Tom gave her fresh water and hay, brushing her coat gently to help her relax. She leaned her head close to his chest, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world had paused. He thought about how close he had come to losing her, not because of anything dramatic or loud, but because of something small and hidden in the grass. Life on the ranch was like that. Danger didn't always come with warning. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it asked for patience, not strength. As the sun climbed higher, Tom leaned on the barn door, watching Starling eat peacefully. A deep feeling of gratitude filled his chest. She had trusted him, and together they had faced something scary, and won. He smiled softly, tipping his hat back. "You're a fighter," he said quietly. "And so am I." The day went on like any other after that. The ranch came alive with familiar sounds. The creak of the windmill, the call of the birds, the low hum of cattle in the distance. But to Tom, everything felt just a little more precious. That morning he had been reminded that courage wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was simply staying calm when everything in you wanted to rush. And as the sun stretched high above the Wyoming plains, Tom knew he would never forget the look in Starling's eyes when she realized she was free. It was the kind of moment that settled deep in the heart, a moment that would live there forever.